Brady, what's going on here with running backs?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this now for, I don't know, probably the past few months and talking about this particular year too with the running back market. And usually what's odd is like this comes to light when you get a combination of veterans not being paid the long-term deals that they want, but then also not seeing the same amount or seeing a number of running backs being drafted in the first round, where teams are just saying, we can find guys second, third, fourth, or even in late rounds of the draft. Isaiah Pacheco is going to be this year's example after what he did for the Chiefs last year. So usually you see that conversation then. What's interesting about this past year's draft is you had two guys taken in the top 15, and both guys who, and we'll get into the discussion, but could potentially be up for Rookie of the Year because of the way I think both teams could utilize them. So you have this disconnect between what veteran running backs feel like they have earned throughout the course of time playing and what they're worth moving forward. And that's really the disconnect is, for running backs, we may be living in a world with a few exceptions, right? Like you get your Christian McCaffreys, your Alvin Kamara's, Zeke Elliott, which is a very unique case, but other guys who are able to utilize in the running game and the passing game as truly like a dual threat style of player. But outside of those guys, like your traditional bell cow back, you're not going to see them be able to get to a second contract. And it's almost like, those guys really see their greatest amount of money they're going to be compensated or paid be at the front end and what they can make as a draft pick potentially. Otherwise, it's going to be really, really hard to make the type of deals they're looking for. So it's unfortunate. I mean, obviously running backs, we all know, have a huge impact. But you can make the case because the way the game's evolved, it's a passing game. And unless they're catching the ball a bunch out of the backfield too, they're probably not going to be receiving top dollar what they think they're worth.
You also, as you pointed out, you can find guys in later rounds that, you can make a deeper dive argument about the necessity of the NFL salary cap and whether or not it's like owners preferring to keep.
Can I ask you this real quick though? It's because we use that argument with only running backs.
Yes.
We don't use it though when we apply it to wide receivers. We see all the time wide receivers that aren't necessarily drafted in the first round come out and be able to have, production and so forth. And now you could maybe use that argument with other positions. Like we don't see a ton of like really, really like day one rookie year, great offensive linemen come in that won a first round pick, maybe second round pick. Like it seems like that specific position we look at and we say like, yeah, like unless they're an ungodly talent like Bijan or Jahmyr Gibbs, we just feel like we can take in the later rounds and we get better value out of them that way. But we never apply that to any other position we're talking about. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because the shelf life of running backs and the way that sort of analytics have, and it's not like heavy analytics. It's just NFL running backs don't last a long time. Nerd. But like so there's certain value, there's certain touches that have been shown analytically that impact the longevity of an NFL running back's career more than other ones. For instance, if you pound somebody up the middle between the tackles 50 times versus throwing a swing pass, 50 swing passes, the guy who's catching the 50 swing passes is taking a way less of an impact on his body, or at least the percent chance that he's taking way less of an impact on his body than the guy running between the tackles. Now, part of that is who you're being tackled by. Part of that is what you're the possibility of incidental contact and like a lower leg injury, something like that. And just sort of like the physicality of that blunt force in that short area versus a running back who can catch the ball, like Christian McCaffrey, catch the ball out in the open space, make some moves, and then duck out of bounds, right? You're just going to take more hits. And so that, I think, is part of the problem too, where if you have a running back who is more of a pass catcher, it's pretty rare that they go really early in the draft. Like McCaffrey's like an exception, right? Where a guy who's that size to do that, like you're never going to see like a Darren Sproles and Austin Eckler type, even though they can run between the tackles, go that early. And so I think it's the guys who are the feature backs. I mean, hell, Derrick Henry went in the second round, right? Like that's it's crazy. And we saw how big we knew his production in college. It's the guys who are the feature backs are dinged because they don't catch the ball, but they're also dinged because they run up the middle, and the longevity of their careers are just not going to be as long. And so that's the issue.
I think you also look at twofold, right? Like a running back, probably even as productive as they can be, there's so many parts right, that allow a running play to be successful. And a lot of it's the blocking, the scheme, maybe how the coach is able to formation things to get angles or to get the defense out of position to be able to have success. So there's even times too, I think there's a degree of, yes, it takes more time to practice and get right. Like anyone would tell you, you only have to have like 3 things go right for a pass play to work, right? You also have to get the shotgun snap with a snap from center. You have to be able to throw the football and have someone catch on the other end. That's it. Yeah. Like you can have a tackle whiff on a block. As long as the throw gets completed, doesn't matter.
You complete a slant with no offensive lineman in theory. Like if the guy gets up, if you get the press,
it works, right? But in a running play, it's really, really hard. If not everyone up front's executing, you get some blocks in the second level too. Clearly the snap, still got to get that, have a good exchange on the handoff. You need a lot more things to happen to be able to work well. And so I'm not saying that that's like a case against how that makes this argument, but I think what happens is it gets a little bit muddied as far as like who deserves the credit for the success running backs have, because you do have offensive lines that when you tend to invest in them, they tend to be offensive lines that they can run the crap out of the football. The Dallas Cowboys were one of those offensive lines that whether it was Zeke, whether it's Tony Pollard, whether it's whoever you want to put in that spot, like they all seem to be able to have some production behind that offensive line. So it tends up taking away from the production and the value of some of those running backs, because you can put another guy back in there as long as he's fast, he can see the holes, he can figure out how to cut back and understands the scheme. He's going to be capable of doing that as well. So to your point, I think they kind of, it's all about where you want to put the value and the money that you have. And I think they just don't look at the running back position as being as valued unless you're truly a unique talent, which I think a lot of people would make the case Dalvin Cook is. And maybe there's some concern with him because of, his health at times and his longevity and how that will play a factor. But it is surprising, like more of these guys aren't getting longer term deals, which by the way, I always have to say long-term deals.
Right.
Because outside of a quarterback, which by the way, a quarterback, even guys who get 5-6 year deals, it's like 3 years of guarantees, then we'll see. And so like a long-term deal for a running back, it's like 2 years of guarantees, and then we'll see, regardless of the length of the contract. So it is funny to hear like they're not getting this long-term deal. It's like, well, if they sign a franchise tag, they're basically getting 1 year less in guarantees than they would be otherwise in a long-term deal.
Correct. So it's like a 5-year deal is essentially a 3-year deal in the NFL. A 4-year deal is a 2-year deal, and there's all kinds of dummy years built in the back end. I would note that. So if you had to guess, how many teams do you think last year? It's actually higher than I thought. We're like above 40% run. Like there was only one team above
50% run.
The 49ers.
No, 49ers were 46%. They were above, yeah, but they're 46%.
Falcons probably ran the most of anyone.
Falcons, that's right. Yeah, 51%. The only team above 50%. The only team with a greater rush rate than a pass rate last year. The Bears at 48%, but you got to factor in Justin Fields running that when you do there. The Panthers at 47%.
Atlanta, probably Carolina, Chicago, Seattle, typically.
Seattle was not up.
Last year, they probably weren't up there as high because of Geno and the year he had. Yep. But traditionally, they've been one of the higher running percentage teams. Which, again, you could say, like, is that philosophy going to work? Is it successful? I mean, you're doing that because they have to make a choice, right? If you're throwing the football more, you've got Patrick Mahomes, you've got Josh Allen, you've got Joe Burrow, you've got someone you feel really confident in, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, et cetera, Lamar, whoever, but Lamar is unique because he's got that also dynamic ability running the football. But even they are evolving and changing, right? Like, I don't imagine Todd Monken's going to run Lamar Jackson as much as they used to run him. So I think that's the hard part too, is like, if you're putting all your money in your quarterback and the guys to protect him, guys to catch for him, how much are you really going to be spending on a running back then? If really you want to be throwing the football about 60% of the time.